Now, final thing that I'm going to look at is the rear wheel. Now I won't record the complete strip down procedure because we've already seen it on the front wheel, but there is obviously one important difference. That important difference is the cassette. So you can see here we have a rear wheel and we have this chunky cassette. So you can actually see freewheel unit is nice and quiet and it's not making any graunching noises. That's a very good sign. So same scenario again, you remove the skewer spindle. You can see that this one does look like it's been in the wars a little bit. There's been a bit of moisture ingress. This will still be usable because it's not bending or anything, but you will want to clean that up. So it's going to go into my cleanup area. Same story here again. We need a, what size is it? It's definitely not a 15, and it's bigger than a 15, it's probably a 17, that one. So let's grab a 17mm spanner. Yep, there we are. And you'll probably want another spanner on the other side. So you're going to be doing both at once. Just bring this up again. So we will have this one on the other side. This one here. And I'm actually going to use a socket, so bear with me. This is one of the other problems you get. If it hasn't been touched for a while and there has been moisture ingress, it will seize up on you and it will do exactly the same thing that can happen on a car. So despite there being this sort of whole cyclist versus car drivers thing, when it comes to maintaining them, they're very similar. So here we go. Similar in the sort of way that they both need items that need to be greased. They both need things that need to be adjusted. All of that sort of good stuff. You can actually see this one has really seized onto that axle spindle. So I'm not sure if this has been done for some time, so that's just given. And that's actually come off. And those cones are really on there as well, so we need to use the spanner. We're also going to need to use that cone spanner as well. So we'll grab said cone spanner and try and find the right size cone spanner. I think is it this one? Yeah, that one should do the job. There we go. So that is actually now beginning to come off. Whoops. Yeah, it's still very tight. Might actually socket this one. Yeah, that's been a while since anything's been done to this, I think. So some moisture has got into the threads and has quite literally locked this all together. I'm hoping that the bearings will be okay, but we shall see once we've got that out. And just by the smell of that, that grease is really old, so that's not been changed or renewed in quite a long time. It still runs smoothly though, so it's obviously done its job, but it hasn't been done anywhere near as recently as that front wheel. Now, the thing that I wanted to show you was how to remove this. Now, this is where your chain whip comes into play, because grab out your chain whip and we will plop it around like so. So it needs to be, I think it's around one of the larger ones, because it gets to about there, like that. You've got that held in place there. You then need this tool, which slips in like so, like that. Now you then need, this is where your socket set comes into play, a ratchet, and what you want to do is have this, on the other side, like so. So what we're going to do is we need to crack it off, if you pardon the phrasing. And sometimes the best way to do this is to actually put this on the ground and do it that way. Now, a mistake I made, you actually want to have that like there, that on there like so you're not touching the cogs directly with the tool itself, so they've actually got a chain on there. Anyway, I'll get this loosened off. It's best to do it on the ground. This is how I did it in the end. Had it wrapped around this one, locked it like so, and then you're able to whiz off this. Now, don't be surprised if some of the little cogs come away. Perfectly normal. Actually makes it easier to clean them. So you get tends to happen usually, you get the first few that sort of come away like that, and then you've got these sort of plastic shims that sit in between them, and then the whole cassette pulls off like so. So you've got the shim there, and then the rest of the cassette is actually solid, but it's just this initial pair. It's just this initial pair that come away, and then you've got this all-important shim that needs to be in place. So we'll get that out of the way, and you'll notice now that we've got a very similar arrangement to what we had before. So this is your freewheel unit, which actually sounds okay, and then you got just a case of doing that, and off it comes, and there's all your little ball bearings in there. Now on the rears, as you can see immediately, they're actually a lot larger, so you will find that you've got different size bearings front and rear, as is usually the case. That's just something to bear in mind. There's also a couple that have gone right the way through there, so they can come out the other side. And you can see here on this one that it looks like it's possible to remove the freewheel unit if you ever needed to replace it. And as expected, it is worth cleaning all of this up as well, so this will need a full clean. Now the other side is very like one of the front hubs, so for that one I'm just going to come inside and then gently prise around until it pops off like so. And that grease is disgusting, that has been on there for a long time. And then we can just feed out ball bearings. We'll be able to clean those up. There's actually a load inside there, so we need to poke those through. There we go. And quite literally now it's just a case of cleaning all of this up and re-greasing it and putting it back together. It's very similar to the front. The only additional complication is that rear cassette. So that's just something you have to bear in mind when you are putting it back together. You've actually got that rear cassette to contend with. And what you want to do with that is you really want to just give all of this a really good clean. Make sure it's free from grit, old grease and everything else that might be on it. And I'm actually probably going to put that into a bath of brake cleaner and leave it soaking. I'll be honest with you, probably leave it soaking overnight, because of just how much gunk and crap is in there. And yeah, I mean, if we have a look in here, that grease is brown. Of all colours, it's brown, and it's still being greasy, but it's well overdue for replacement. So that really is what is involved with stripping down and rebuilding the wheels on your push bike. It's depending on how long ago it was done, it can be quite involved. It is actually surprisingly satisfying, because you're doing it yourself, and it's ultimately quite an easy job to do yourself. It's not something that's completely out of the realms of possibility for somebody coming into the world of sort of maintenance for bikes, cars, etc. It's one of the easier things that you can do. It's just fiddly more than difficult, but ultimately there is quite a lot of satisfaction actually doing this yourself, as I discovered when I started doing it myself. So that for now is going to be it for this video. In the next video I'm probably going to be covering actually putting the new brakes onto the bike, so removing these discs and putting new brakes onto the bike itself. But for the moment I'm going to carry on, get these bearings cleaned up, get all this grease cleaned off, get it back together, and then I'll be ready to start on the brakes. Hello and welcome back. So I said yesterday that I wasn't actually going to film or document any of the servicing of the rear hub, but I got to be honest, I think it's actually different enough to warrant being covered in a fair amount of detail. So I've had this soak in overnight, and I'll be honest, I couldn't find any brake cleaner, so I've used white spirit instead, and as you can see that actually has done quite a good job of dissolving a lot of the residue and oil and grease and dirt and everything else that gets collected. So what I'm going to do now is to get everything out onto these. Actually, is that cleaner on the other side? Nope, just dirty, but it'll be fine. So I'm going to get these out. There we go. Get all of them out and let them dry off. What I'm also going to do is grab this toothbrush, give them all a real good scrub so that you can actually get in there and get any sort of grit or anything like that. It's really out of the way. To give you a good idea, just to get rid of as much of it as possible. And having it soaking in white spirit overnight has actually done quite a good job. Now I'll be honest with you, that is overkill. You don't really have to have it soaking overnight. It's just I'd decided I'd finished for the day and just left it where it was, and obviously just sort of went indoors again. But it has actually done a pretty good job of cleaning all of these up and getting rid of any sort of in-ground grease, grime, grit, etc. You don't want grit on there, ideally, because that will wear things away, especially the chain. So you just want to give it as much of a clean as possible. Now these are okay, they're not too worn, but it's quite possible that I might want to consider replacing the whole cassette at some point. They do wear out, and you can sort of generally tell by looking at the teeth. Now these still have quite a nice sort of top to them, but you can sort of get to the point where they become sort of rounded, and when they get to that rounded point they're well past renewal. So when I was cycling on a daily basis, I tended to replace the entire rear cassette every second service. So I actually replaced that whole cassette once a year. Now they're not actually that expensive, well they certainly weren't when I was working on these when I was younger, but it's a well worth item. Sorry, it's an item that's well worth replacing every once in a while, because they do wear. And what you sort of start to notice is the bike won't stay in gear, and it becomes increasingly hard to select certain gears. So it does make sense to replace them. These have actually come out okay, so I think I've got the amount I'll be riding this bike, probably another season out of these. I also tended to replace the chain at the same time as well, so there we are. There we go. Perfect, we'll just let those dry and get rid of all the old grease on this axle. There we are. And have a fish around in here for the other bits. So we've got the end caps, one of the cones, the shim, end bolts and washer, the lock-in cap for the cassette, and then we should have numerous bearings, ball bearings rather. So that's actually going to take a little time to get those out, and what I'll do is go and pour those into something like a sieve. If you've got a sieve or anything like that, really good thing to use to actually pour out the liquid and get any components that you, certainly small components that you've had cleaning in there. So I'm going to go and do that, and I'll be back shortly. There we go, there's all the bearings. So we can let those dry. And I think these ones do need a little bit of extra persuasion. You can see a bit of that disgusting grease left in there, so we'll just get that out. There we go, we can let those dry off, and do this one as well. So on the rear, the bearing top caps actually do differ. So this one is actually on the side that has the cassette, and this one is on the other side. So you just need to remember that there are some differences. These are particularly grubby, to be honest with you, and yeah, they're needing a little bit of extra persuasion to get clean. So we'll just do this. There we go, just run that round. There we are. It's actually done a nice job on that. So just need to let these dry out for a bit now. There we go. And what's this one up to? This one is looking a bit grubby inside, so do that as well. And I think that one is now, yeah, that one's okay now. Right, so I'm going to let these dry out. And what I'm going to do next, but I'll do it off camera because you've seen me do it on the front, is just to give the inner races of the rear wheel a bit of a clean up so that they're ready for reassembly. Now, one thing to note if you are using these degreasers and you're doing it in a garage, make sure you've got a window open. So I've got my window open at the moment, and getting some nice refreshing air into here just to make sure that you keep everything free from solvent fumes. Right, let's get this rear wheel sorted. One thing I'm going to point out is even after quite a bit of cleaning, there's still this residue in there which is covering the shiny surface. So I'm going to use a bit of 1500 grade wet and dry to see if I can get rid of some of that. So let's put some of this in here. Let's see if this helps at all. It'll at least, even if I can't get rid of the staining, it will at least smooth and polish the surface that remains, so that we have a better surface for the bearings. And it does seem to be helping, it's a lot smoother. So I'm going to continue doing that for a few minutes, and I'll do that on both sides. So that skewer that was previously covered in rust is now not so covered in rust, and it's in much better shape than it was. It will still need to be replaced at some point because, you know, it has got affected by rust, but it's in better shape than it was, so it's certainly going to be usable during the initial build-up of the bike, and then I can change it very quickly off camera once I've got the bike assembled. But I don't have another set in my collection at the moment, so it'll have to wait. Now I'm just having a look at the various bits that I've got, and I just realised I need to find the end of the skewer, which I've got here. So I'll just pop that on so I don't get it lost. And now to give ourselves a bit of a deck clearing session. So we're just going to move things that we don't need immediately off of the workbench. And what we can then do is, once we've got things cleared up a little bit, we can start reassembling the wheel itself. So just move various things out of the way. So we want to be just left with the items that we need for this particular exercise, and that is various bits, cassettes and other bits and bobs, and the wheel itself, which is excuse me, coming up here. So we'll start off with the cassette side. So we're going to start off with some grease, and pretty much the same story as yesterday. Blob it around on the race, and then grab your ball bearings and start the assembly process. So where are we? We have many ball bearings. There we are. Let's start with these three. Now the ones on the rear are larger than the ones on the front, so consequently you don't need quite as many. So we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's your lot. That's all you need for that. So you've got 8 bearings in there. Now we do some grease over the top. So you can see them in there, with the grease over the top like so. There you go. And now we take the top cap, which is this one, and that goes on this way round, and then presses down onto the bearings like so. So that's in. And now we're ready for the cassette. So for the cassette, just so that you don't have any trouble taking it off next time, I just like to put a light amount of grease on the freewheel unit. Don't need excess huge amounts, but you just need enough so you can just run it around like so. It also helps to sort of trap any dirt that may get in there, so when you come to clean it the next time, it's a little bit easier to sort of get the dirt off, because the dirt will be trapped inside the grease. Once that's done, we take our cassette and we start to reassemble the cassette. So as you can see, inside here you have these little indentations, and it matches up with what's on the freewheel. So Needs a couple of attempts to get it on. Once it's on, that's what you have. And then we go for our shin. We then go for our next largest cog, which goes on, it basically goes on so that the flat side is to the hub itself, and the side with the ridges on is away from the hub. I learned a while ago those ridges actually aid the travel of the chain, so that when you're changing gear, they help the chain get onto the next cog, which was honestly something I didn't realise for a while. This one, same story again, so this one goes on, as I say, takes a couple of attempts because you've got to find the right point. This one is a bit different because you want this side going this way in, like so. This is like your final lock-in piece, effectively. And I think that is in. Then you've got this, which goes on top there, and as a final gesture, a bit more grease in there. And a little bit in there. Not strictly needed, but I always act on more grease the better. It's the same approach I use when doing XJ40 front wheel bearings. The more grease, the better. Now you need your tool, which goes here. And then you just need to ratchet that down. Oh, wrong way. And you want to get it so there. Doesn't need to be super tight. It needs to be hand tight on the ratchet itself. And once that's done, you can turn your attention to the other side. So the other side is like one side of one of the front wheel bearings, so it's actually a little bit easier to deal with. And it is exactly the same procedure as before. Grease. Grease is the word. Ball bearings, so we've got 2, 3, 4. Grease doesn't seem to like staying on there for some reason. Should be okay, I'll put a bit more in there. There we go. And we got 5. Oh, it's done it again. Ugh. 6. 7. And 8. 7, like so. Number 8. In you go. And there we are. Now we just need a smear of grease over the top. There we go. Then you got your cap, which is this one here. It's very like the front. So same story again with a nice blob of grease in there. over the top. There we go, like so. Press it down, and you're in. So the final step is put in the axle stub back in. So obviously do your standard, fill that up in there. Put some grease over the axle stub. And we're going to go from cassette side through to the other side. So we'll do like so, through, there we go, to here. And we've got cone bearing on. Do not worry if it's greasy. It will help it to actually go on to... I don't know what that is. What's this? Looks like some kind of little plastic seal that was on there. That's interesting. So I need to get probably the cone spanners out for this one. So we've got 17 on the other side, so we'll lock off this side with the 17, like so, and then we'll just use the cone spanner to nip up this side. Actually, I'll do it by hand first. Just having that spanner there is enough to help me on my way, which is good. Yeah, I do think that there was a little seal. You don't see that on all cone bearings, so you can tell that this is a bit of a higher end setup because it does have that little seal in there. And there we go. I think that's almost there. So I'll do it to about there. And there's still a bit of play sideways, so we need to go in a smidge more. Blimey, it's windy. Yep, that's definitely windy. That's blown those transistors off the shelf. So we're at the end of Storm Eunice at the moment. So it's still quite windy outside. There we go, and just off a touch. Perfect. So all I need to do now is to basically lock that off. So we've got this washer, and then we've got this nut rather, so that'll go onto here. Hello transistors. And we can just lock that into place. Shut that window a little bit. Let's put on the ventilation, which is about, oh bloody windows, there we are. So let's just see how free moving that is. To be honest, that's a little bit raunchy for my liking, so I'll back off that one, knock out the cone at the touch, back it back on again, and I think it's there. Whoops. Oh, it's still a bit raunchy. Back off. So it always takes a couple of moments as I said, on the front to get it perfectly in place, and I think that should be okay. So we'll stick the skewer through. So here's our skewer, and I've actually got a bit of residual grease on my fingers, so I can use that to my advantage. So I'll actually put a bit of just grease on there anyway. There we go. That should hopefully stop it getting rusty again. And then through the axle and out the other side. And that is now ready to be reattached to the bike. So that's both wheels done. So what I'm going to do is get the bike frame over, and we'll actually look at putting the wheels back into place. You can see what's involved with doing that. So bear with me a moment. So here we are with the bike, and don't worry, I will be cleaning this chain in a moment, but the first thing that I want to do is to just get it all reassembled again. And whilst the wheel is off, it actually gives you a good opportunity to just get in here, give all of this a nice clean. And get rid of any sort of road grease, grime, etc. And what I'm going to do, just to make my life a bit easier as well, is to just take off this caliper, because that will need to be removed shortly. So I just need to find my Allen keys. There we are. Remember rightly, I think it was a 5mm. No, it was a 6mm. Yeah, let's try 6 initially. Nope, bikes are weird, and it's using. Oh no, I grabbed the. No, I did grab the 6. It's using a 5.5. And no, it's not using a 5.5. Okay. Is it using a 5? Okay. Bikes aren't so weird. Though sometimes they do use 0.5mm increments into the tools. You need to remove things. I think that goes back to the world of metricness. Sorry. The world of imperialism. Rather. Imperial measurements. There we go, so that's that caliper out of the way. I'll just make sure that you're seeing that on camera. Yeah, I think you are. And the next thing I'm going to do is finish off that cleaning that I started. I'll even give the chain a quick. Oops, move the bike a bit. There we go. Move it again. There we go. Give the chain a quick once over, like so. Now, ideally, you'd want to remove the chain and let it soak for a bit in some suitable degreaser. At the moment, I don't have my chain removal tool, although I'll be honest, I have just purchased another one, so we can do that at a later date. So we're going to start off with the rear wheel. And here's the rear wheel coming over now. And you sort of pull the chain like that, and what tends to sort of happen is if you pull the derailleur back a bit, you can just shift the whole wheel in like so, and that is almost in. Takes a little bit of persuasion. So it takes a little bit of time to get it in, but after a short moment or so, the bike, or rather the wheel, is in place, and you can make sure that it is central. So I tend to use these 2 points as, can you see that? Let me come round. Use these 2 points as a measurement, and I want the wheel to be centralised within those 2 points, so you can sort of move it like so. And once you've got it into a centralised position, lock off your quick release. And there you go, that is your wheel in place, and as you can see, that's running lovely and smooth actually. That is really going nicely. Now one thing I will do is I'll probably knock it up a gear or so, so it's nearer the top of its run. There we go. And something I like to do is just I put a bit of a cloth in there. I'll just do this on these derailleur cogs. Same on the bottom one, which would be the top if you didn't have it upside down. Really just to clean them off. Give it a bit of a general degrease and let that dry out. Just give it really sort of a good general clean up all over. Then, whoops, try not to get the chain caught, and then I can actually just grab the chain like so. And this is a really good way to clean the chain. If you've got a brush, you can actually use that as well, so like a toothbrush or something. And then just run the chain by hand. It does really do a job very nicely indeed. Now the final step for the rear wheel is to give it some lubrication, and for the lubrication I think I've still got some of my very old ceramic finish line stuff left. Oh yeah, there's plenty of that left, so I just run this quite literally over the chain like so, making sure it gets nicely into that derailleur. A little bit over there, a little bit over there. Just generally lube everything up, and then I can knock it down a gear. And actually do it on the cog itself. And that is running lovely and smooth. Now, I am not an expert when it comes to tuning up gears or anything like that. It's something that I want to learn, but it's not something I'm going to show you how to do on camera because I don't know how to do it myself. So what I would recommend, if you do need to have your gears tuning, is to drop it into, or book it into a local bike shop and just ask them to set up the gearing for you. Because ideally you don't really need anything else doing, because you've just stripped everything down and re-greased it. But all you might want them to do is just set up the gearing for you. And as you can see now, it's running very, very smoothly indeed. So I am going to have to remove this wheel again to do the brakes. But I'll be honest, I wanted to get it back on and really just sort of give it a run through like so that we know that everything is running nice and smoothly, all of that grease has settled and it's all back together. Front wheel, similar procedure, in fact identical procedure, and I'll just see if I can get a shot of the front wheel, the general front wheel area. So I'm going to need to move the bike a little bit. An XJ40 in the way. And it's pretty much the same deal again, to be honest with you. I just need to remember what way it goes on, this way. Now at the moment there's no brakes on here, so that makes life a bit easier. There we go. There. And it's the same story again with this. You use the forks as almost like a bit of a centre line, and once that's centralised, done. But that one's a bit tight. It's not as free running. Let's have a look and see why. It might be a bit tight actually. Let's just loosen it off. A couple of notches. That's better. Perfect. And there you go. Now, when the bike is back upright again, one thing I like to do is to basically give both wheels, hold the bike in the air and just thump both wheels. So if they don't immediately fall off, you can be pretty confident that they're going to stay in place, to be honest with you. And this one is, if I just do that, that's running very smoothly indeed. That is exactly what I wanted it to do. Rear one is also pretty much the same. So that's obviously contacting that box at the moment, but pretty much the same deal. And you can actually see I've got a bit of oil on the tyre, so just need to wipe that down. Anyway, that'll be okay. Just give it a wipe off. It's because I've put an awful lot of oil onto the chain itself. I've got to be honest, one of the things I'm probably guilty of doing is actually putting too much oil on the chain, as it tends to fly off when I'm cycling, and it gets to a point where it stops flying off, so it's at the point where it then has enough oil and not too much oil. But there we go. And that is really how to service the hubs on your bike. That's both front and rear. Now, I hope you found this interesting. If you have, don't forget to hit the like button, and also consider subscribing, because I do a lot of videos like this, and I hope that you find them interesting. So thank you very much for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.